welcome to FireTalks Online. We've got a very short session today. We've only got one, maybe two talks, but they're going to blow your mind. With me today, we've got Kilta, who's going to be talking about Building 3308, a fascinating talk about pen testing. Outside the normal scope that you'd imagine. So with that said, with no further ado, I'm going to pass the baton to you, my friend. Take it away.
Thanks, Rainmaker. All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to my first talk today. Today I'm going to be discussing the fictional building of 3308 and how a group of teenagers broke in despite seeming pretty much impenetrable. Bear in mind, I am absolutely no expert on this or even remotely a professional. I'm simply going over ideas of physical security that I found interesting, mainly from ideation stemming from personal experience. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. So what is Building 3308 exactly? Well, 3308, or the Westbrook as it's internally known, is owned by one of the leading security firms, VS Corp. It was designed as the main testing ground for their latest products in physical security, ranging from request for exit systems or REX to experimental psychological systems, whose notoriety has gained significant controversy, and thus making it a large focus of this talk. Essentially, its entire building is a pen tester's wet dream. 3308 was also a testing playground for a neural network acting as an automated access controlled system, AACS for short, which was intended to be a drop-in replacement for your usual night shift security workers, sort of a system where you'd normally have some people watching CCTV and a group of armed or unarmed security guards patrolling the area. This was proposed as being a more cost-effective solution, only requiring a team of data operatives on site to maintain the AI's behavior and such. And I'm going to cover this a bit later on. And no, I promise you, this is not going to be an AI gone rogue story. Its defense, much like many other companies, relies on four key strategies, very similar to that you'd find in, say, cybersecurity. That being deterrence, mitigation, management, and assessment. And naturally, the young heroes of this story managed to defeat almost every single one of these things. So let's start by discussing those. Oops, forgot that slide. All right, so the first one is deterrence. And 3308 specifically would rely on heavy presence of bidirectional security cameras, such as the ones pictured if it weren't so low res.
It looks cyberpunk, so I like it.
Thank you. But yeah, they used bidirectional security cameras as opposed to mono-angled cameras, specifically because it induces a lot more of a psychological message saying, hey, we can see you no matter what you're doing. It brings a lot more intimidation, proven, apparently so anyway. And each door and telephone box would only lead into one small section of the building, and each one of these panels and doors was quietly watched by these cameras. The on-site security guards' presence, though it was usually quiet, with a few guarded buttons occasionally checking the perimeter's fences every half an hour. This is specifically done to provide an illusion of a more heavily staffed presence than what actually existed. These guards also had strict training in the building's psychological measures, which I'm also going to go over shortly. And most of that comes down to mitigation, which is where the Ionia AATS system comes in. So in terms of mitigation threat analysis, all of it was handled by this neural net AI. It would also manage entry for visitors, provide security access for registered personnel, and ultimately aims to provide an alternative to having a system exclusively based... Wait, wrong section. Right. But yes, it's usually just proven inefficient. Bold claim, I know, so I'm going to back that up with a source in Ionia. And I was reading through Exeter's publication on a collaboration with Microsoft where they are going over the future of physical security. And I picked up this one interesting quote saying, today's model relies heavily on manual processes, which often results in missed signals. It is nearly impossible, not to mention costly, for humans to monitor all security content without digitally powered analytics. That is why it's most commonly estimated among security professionals that more than 90% of security footage goes unseen and is typically only watched for reactive investigation. So essentially, the main problem being you have a very active sort of deterrent that is constantly monitoring and gathering lots of data, but you're not actively using it. And so, what do you do when you have a large data set that you need to comb through a lot of data very quickly and only pick up specific things, and you want to automate that? Well, let's just do what we've been doing for the last 10 bloody years or so and just automate that with Python and do And that's essentially the entire idea behind Ionia. It is meant to try and automate the data flow that you would normally be monitoring through physical security, so you have less of reliance on human error, and you can set fine-tune AI on very specific data sets for your specific internal corporation, and try to essentially mitigate threats actively rather than dealing with them afterwards. This isn't just like some niche novel idea either. A lot of the top security firms that answer the question on Microsoft Security Survey says that in the next 3 to 5 years, they wish for big data and analytics to become a lot more commonplace, followed by cloud computing and advanced identification, all of which heavily line in with a lot of physical security, trying to identify your threat actors, trying to gauge your threat level actively and such. And obviously, you're still going to need some kind of physical presence, and this would normally be managed by, aside from Ionia, who would act as the AACS, running on a zero-trust-based vetting system in which all personnel and visitors carrying RFID-based keycards. Essentially, Ionia would rely on a system where every single person, the personnel of the building, would basically be carrying the equivalent of PAM cards. And this would be used for allocating different security clearances, who should be in what section of the building at what time, so you can have very, very tight control over what the people in your organization are doing, and if you're having any internal threat actors who are trying to act out against companies' interests. Let me grab my water real quick. Since Ionia would also be able to control a lot of the doors and other systems within the building, if there is someone unidentified, they can just lock the doors and call security until the threat has gone away. And then if it is just someone non-malicious just getting stuck by happen chance, then security would just kindly escort them out the building and nothing would become of it. Essentially, but for other threat actors who do actually wish to pursue harm against someone else or the company, you can make the environment as hostile and as threatening as possible, which is where the psychological aspect comes in, and this is the part where I've actually been putting a lot of thought into. Essentially, especially during night time, which is when a lot more people tend to break in, you can use a lot of psychological tricks to try to make your attacker or your threat actor leave the building as quickly as possible. the AI specifically and in the system relies on knowing that someone is going to break into this building eventually. It's just a matter of how long they stay in and what kind of damage they do while they're inside. So essentially, you want to create an environment that is as hostile as possible to them, without, violating human rights laws. This would normally be achieved with extremely impressive sound design, visual effects, and distortions. So you'd have like literal smoke and mirror effects, where you'd think you'd see someone walking around the corner like a few hundred meters away, or you'd be able to hear somewhat distant conversations over speaker systems, and you'd think that there is someone in the building with you looking for you. And essentially anyone in their right mind would just be terrified and want to get the hell out. That is the entire purpose behind the system. But obviously this isn't going to be ideal. Most of the time you're always going to have someone who either wisens up to these tricks or simply just does not care. And in this case, we switch to management, or simply gets the hell out of my building. And normally, if you actually need to remove any threat actor by force, you would have a standard QRF team or quick reaction force that would be deployed to the sites in, say, under a time frame of 5 minutes. 5 minutes being the absolute bare minimum. For other threat actors who are doing harm to others inside the building, you can also employ a wide range of active access delay systems, or AADS. As the name implies, AADS normally involves systems like smoke or tear gas or vehicle transportation systems, where you can essentially try and deter your attackers from being able to do any harm to anyone else, simply just from being disoriented. And the advantage to this kind of approach would normally be you can stop a lot of attacks happening on pretty much anyone, especially wide-scale terrorist attacks, without actually needing to have someone getting involved or putting into a firefight. So, knowing all these insane amounts of systems that's been put in place for this building, and this entire state-of-the-art system that is actively identifying every single person within the building, how did a group of teenagers break in, I hear you ask?
That's exactly what I want to know, because honestly, after what you just showed me, how this almost appears impenetrable, but obviously not. So, how did they do it?
Very good question. So, lots of it comes down to human error. You cannot have a secure building without any group of people who are actively monitoring anything, without there being a reliance on human operators for accumulating for the fault of the AI, since absolutely nothing is going to be perfect. So, what they did essentially is that they managed to stake out the building for, say, a few days. They could gauge the guards' reactions, how they act, their time frames and their rotations, what they would be normally talking about. And from there they managed to pick up that the guards were actually very disgruntled with how the AI was behaving the last few days, where people would either be given too high or too low clearance, and there would be a lot of software bugs that would lock them out of the building, and they would often have to call up their data officers who would have to try and accumulate those errors. But since they are always on holiday or whatever, it became increasingly frustrating. So getting into the building was, or at least swiping an RFID card from them, was extremely easy, since you can essentially rely on them being like, you can just go up to them and say, hey, my ID card's not working again, can you let me in? They're not going to question it. They've probably heard the same story 100 times already. They just let them walk right in. And since they had their homebrew RFID keycard scanners, all you'd really need to do is just get close enough tag that RFID card, and you would essentially have the physical aspects parts of getting in down. You can get in the building, but even despite this, since the card is still heavily tied to the ID of the user, you would still need to be able, they couldn't stay in for very long because the ID part of the card did not correspond with who was using what exits and entrances at that time. You'd say the security guard named John couldn't be going into one end of the building to another in under 2 minutes. It was literally impossible, and the AI flagged this as being something that was anomalous, and thus reported it to the data officers on site. But even despite this, you can, if you're good enough, which they were, they managed to frame the security guard as being the one who lets them in unconditionally, and lost my train of thought.
All good.
But yeah, after they managed to talk that out with the security guards, they essentially managed to delay the entire process of them getting caught long enough for them to swipe the fire alarm and make their escape, thus proving the entire system a lot more valuable than it originally was. After this, I'm not very good at coordinating slides, Jesus. The last aspects of trying to get into this building and essentially remaining in the building was disabling Aeonia's sensors and scanners through homebrew EMP devices. And one thing that you actually don't really hear a lot or see a lot in many tutorials online is that you can actually overcharge a disposable camera with supercell batteries. So you can essentially fry pretty much any electronic, no matter how well guarded it is. You can increase the range of that EMP to say 20 meters, and you would be able to disable, say, the sensors that Aeonia would be scanning with, or even the cameras. And since there wasn't many people actually actively monitoring CCTV still, no one really noticed these cameras being disabled at the times that they were until it was far too late, and they had just a bunch of disabled cameras, so they couldn't even trace exactly where, the path that the intruders had taken. So, in conclusion from this insane rambling and this insane story, good security essentially comes down to not only the human, but also the machine aspect. If you do not have proper logging on when certain systems go down, or have enough of a human presence and have an over-reliance on AI, or worse, you rely too much on humans and neglect your AI's suggestions, you are inevitably going to be running into a lot of problems with your physical security. The final threat actor, of course, is going to be your own internal security. You can't always rely on your guards being hyper-vigilant of everyone 24/7, especially when your internal corporate morale is as low as it is. When you do that, essentially everyone has the idea that something is just going to go wrong anyway, and without that positive kind of reinforcement behind it, and without enough trust in the systems that you have put in place, you will eventually run into a lot of problems with whatever kind of system you have. You need good trust in your people, your equipment, and your entire security system. If you don't have any one of those, then no matter how secure and advanced your setup is, you're always going to be vulnerable to anyone. and in this case, a group of teenagers.
Well done.
There we go.
Well, I gotta say, wow. Again, hypothetically, this is an amazing story that goes to show several different key points that I think you highlighted really well. The lack of logging can lend itself to risk. The over reliance on humans as preventative or just or controls versus AI and vice versa. I mean, you have to have that that even mix of reliance on both. I think was really fascinating. The fact that you made a point about morale being an issue, and the fact that someone needs to watch the watchers. These are all controls that these group of teenagers could easily bypass. And in all honesty, I thought the EMP idea was fascinating, albeit this would have had to been done by teenagers with or straight up malicious actors, as EMPs are definitely not part of a standard pen test engagement.
Yeah.
But
that EMP part was definitely. I mean, is that true that you can actually use a disposable camera, or is that just something that you made up as part of the story?
No, you can actually do it. There's like a million guides on the internet, and I've actually started my own small business of actually selling those that I make myself.
Well, don't sell them in the United States because it's very, very illegal.
Wow.
Dude,
I haven't heard of that. That's impressive, though.
yeah, and again, you can actually supercharge them with another, say, cell battery. So you can basically overcharge your, depending on how you wire up the resistors and the other transistors within the flash part of the camera, you can basically get a much bigger bang if you wire it up correctly. Obviously, the biggest risk is you blowing off your own fingers if you don't charge everything properly, burning yourself. But
I hope you're not speaking from experience here.
How many
let's
fingers do
just
you
say I
have?
wasn't actually caught.
I thought the psychological part was actually pretty impressive. I mean, I would imagine anybody that's walking into a building and at night they're starting to hear those sounds or something like that. I mean, they'll definitely give your junior people they'll get pretty nerve-wracked if they saw lights or hearing those voices and then the winding hallways.
Honestly, I thought that was a really good point too, that more organizations ought to leverage because of the psychological aspect of hearing people that you may or may not be there. I think this goes to this is way back when I took the CISSP, that a lot of things aren't necessarily barriers, but they don't prevent entirely. They just I'm running a blank here, but they temporarily block access. If an actor wants in hard bad enough, they'll get in.
Yep. But if you provide enough roadblocks or just make it hard enough, you'll get rid of most people.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious. Go ahead.
That just reminded me of, at one point I hooked a motion sensor to the sound of a shotgun being racked.
Oh, God.
That's along the same lines of what we're doing here.
Don't give me ideas.
In actual physical security, there are systems already that can monitor for things like gunshots already. There are existing gunshot detection systems, or in some cases even racking a silent shotgun can be sensitive enough to trigger quite a lot of them. So it's definitely not that far off, and I can see how it would work. Most of the time they're only relegated for, say, government buildings, so I'm pretty sure, since they're the only ones that any sort of risk of terror attack.
Well, that's kind of goes back to another thing I was going to mention with the, I forget the acronym, the delay system with tear gas and whatnot. I typically do most of my engagements in work in the corporate sector where that would be overkill. And I had to think, I was like, what would be the use case for something like that? But you're absolutely right. Government, infrastructure, these sorts of things absolutely warrant that level of deterrent systems. So, yeah, absolutely. They're there.
I was those government buildings, now think about government city, which doesn't exist on the map, and a 27-year-old woman got in just fine, and everybody's still in shock in the family. There is a city that does exist. I'm not allowed to say much information about it because my family in that city, my uncle live there and work. He's not allowed to leave the city, to go anywhere outside of it. If something happened, that city is the only city that has always food, always electricity, everything. That's a priority because of what they do, and it's scary. And my mom got drunk, got tired, decided to visit her aunt, my grandma. She passed the security. She passed the guys with the guns, the mines, everything, without any ID card. My grandma is still asking, how did she do it? Because there's no way you can get in.
Have her come back up next month and do a talk at FireTalks Online, and we've gone from a hypothetical situation to a real one.
I can tell them it was. I remember it. I was young. We were drunk. We were tired. It was a USSR city where you can buy kielbasa and a meat. So we bought like 5 kilos, sitting in a bus, eating it like stone people, just biting it in front of people. I'm like, Mom, I don't want to know what you did. So she has crazy stories.
I would love to hear more.
Honestly, you could just do a whole fire talk on all of your family stories, and that would be insanely interesting.
I would love that. That would be engaging as all hell.
So everybody knows about Russia-Ukraine situation. And I'm like, Mom, sit at home tight. Don't say a word. Don't open the door. Just sit at home. We're from North Caucasus. People already hate us. She's like, it's a third time. We're going to be enemy of a nation. What are we going to do? Send me to Kalama? Oh, wait, Siberia? Oh, shit, I forgot. Siberia is in rent to China. They cannot send me there anymore. I'm like, Mom, just sit at home. Don't say a word. Okay? Like, please. Because they whoever protested it, or said against war or something, they send their officers to your family and relatives and pick them up without the right for a lawyer. So, what they don't talk about much right now, but people protest. Well, yeah, but they don't touch those who protest. We put them in a jail, but their family being taken away and sent without a lawyer's right.
That's the scary thing, is it's hard to dissent when that is the ramification, and it's not just a ramification on you, but your family and your extended network. I mean, it's everyone's at risk due to speaking your voice in these situations. It's a rough time to be alive in these places.
Well, where we are, I'm from. It used to be Kuban, part of Ukraine, then it got separated. Then it was Krasnodarski Krai. Then it became part of North Caucasus and separate Respublika Adygea, where it's more Adygi, Cherkesy, Chechency, and etc. So it's a little different. We're like, no matter where we go, we're enemy. No matter where. Because it's either of a blood or where we're raised or part of a city. And I'm kind of that's why I'm used to people hating and stuff, which doesn't really bother me. But when the war started, their food started to fade right away. Like, they were talking about the war, it started, but it was already fading. Banks were closed on second day, most of the banks.
Oh, yeah.
Like, Western Union was working, which is really interesting because it worked on Monday, closed on Tuesday, it worked on Wednesday, it closed on Tuesday night again.
But Coinbase or whatever these cryptocurrency markets are staying open regardless. I think that's interesting.
Oh, yeah, my mom said a week ago, because people, what's going on? And I don't tell anyone. And I'm like, oh, I'm just silent and stuff. Because my mom, like, Linda, she's like, shut up, don't say a word. I'm like, of course. I'm like, I'm used to it. I'm like, do you shut up? She's like, no. I'm like, thank you. what they did, they closed the banks. There was news where he said, "Hey, like what Yeltsin did, he cleared some. I know some people are okay, but a lot of people, their checking accounts and savings accounts were cleared. Like what happened in 1998, I think my mom said, because the country needs their money, so they cleared those money. You're not getting them back. The bank closed their gun, and they said that, hey, we're gonna go. We are moving since SWIFT is closed. We are moving to Union Pay, China payment system, China bank system, I should say. Within this month, you'll hear the news where the cards will be available, the debit cards, credit cards, and you have to buy the card, which is interesting. You're supposed to open an account, right? But they said you're supposed to buy the card and it will cost 5,000 rubles.
How much is that
So,
translated to or converted to USD?
so $1 is 120 rubles right now.
Okay.
I sent $100. It was like 12 grand.
So 5,000 rubles is roughly $50.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, all I gotta say is that it's interesting situation over there, obviously, and it's interesting to see how the financial industry is responding in accordance to this geopolitical nightmare, but how this is the first, I think, global conflict where cryptocurrency has played a role in many ways.
If you guys are into history, in 1774, there was a Turkish war where my place where I'm from was first cities who became Christian, and Kiev was Russia. And there's even a story and cartoon called Knyaz Vladimir, where Knyaz Vladimir and Elena become Christians and started Christianity. And after that, in 1774 was a huge Turkish. 1774 they signed the treaty because there was a huge Turkish war, where they say if Crimea or Sevastopol will not be under Russia, then Turkey has the ownership of Crimea, Sevastopol, and some part of Ukraine, I think. Then in 1998, they reported and gave the Crimea and part of Sevastopol to Ukraine as a treaty and independence gift. But in 1917, when Rasputin, that's when all the plans started. In 1917, Rasputin started where he took care of the Tsar's family. We become democratic, USSR. 1939, we started the Poland War. Then the Second World War II. In 1998, we did their thing with Ukraine. It's all started what happening today, 1917.
Wow. All this boils back to 1917?
If you will read from 1917 and what they're talking about, their goals and stuff, you will see what's happening today. And in 1998, one of their politicians, Zhirinovsky, he talked about it, that what will happen today. He talked about it in 1998. There's a YouTube video, and he tried to talk about it today, and they put him in infused coma, so he will not talk more about it.
Whoa. That doesn't surprise me, but it's shocking nonetheless. Wow.
Yeah, I say a lot of the geopolitical events are tied from the last World War II still. And I mean, you still have stuff with like Israel and the Middle East area is related to World War II. And some of it is even still related to World War I. It's just unfinished business that keeps on brewing.
Because also, with people talking about Russia, Ukraine, Russia, I have, my grandpa has 6 children in his family. And his sister, my grandma, she's the last, and another grandma who is alive. And her husband, my favorite grandpa, I love him so much, his sister lives in Kiev. And people did not let them to cross the border and come to us, because she has a family, right? We're not far from the border. We're like 6 hours away. They didn't let them cross and come to us. So we lost connection with her. We don't know if she's alive. We don't know where she is. She had to evacuate. But I think no matter where or not, you should let people cross the border and come to their families if they're evacuating.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a humanitarian refugee situation. I mean, especially if somebody has a place to go to, no less.
Yeah, they did not let her, so we don't know where she is. And she has a cancer. She's old with her husband, kids, and so we have a connection. That's why everybody at work, can we talk to you, Lotus? I'm like, yeah. No, you're not the people. Oh, guys, do you want me to make you all laugh? You sitting down?
I'm laughing. I'm sitting.
You sitting? Okay. Oh, I was in a relationship for 9 months, right? But what happened? The guy was so interested in this war. I was not very interested. I was just making sure my family is safe, the people I can help safe, sending the money, everything. And then 3 days into the war, 4 days into war, he's like, send me a text message. Within this month being together, you still did not become beautiful. You're so fat and ugly and stuff. I'm like, oh, hell, let's talk about business. I'm like, what's the reason? Tell me. And he said, well, my coworker said you're Russian and Nazi. I'm like, okay. I'm like, it's okay, just say it. Say it. You want to break up because I'm Russian? Yes. I'm like, okay. I'm like, here's the door.
Yeah, wow. Well done. You don't need that in your life anyway.
I mean, sex was, no, it was not good enough. You know what? No.
Hey, this is a PC channel or PG channel here.
I'll say, intellectual level was not up to the desired level.
Understood. You have to be of equal partners for a relationship to work, and so I understand. I've been there, done that.
It made me think like how easy, like we talked about security, how we work with security buildings, everything, and how easy, like Kyle said, how easy it is based on human. He's like, we're all humans. The same here, just war happened, right? It's the first time I dated in America. And just because of the war, because the person doesn't even know my actual nationality, where I'm from, my bloodline, assumed and left. And the same with security, how easy it is for a person to change their mind or their side. How not many people we have who will stay loyal no matter what.
Well, and all things considered, just because of one's nationality does not dictate their political views. I mean, fact of the matter is that a large contingent of Russians are not necessarily on board with the incursion invasion of Ukraine. I mean, how many people in the United States are, proponents are backing the Make America Great Again movement? I mean, not everybody's all on the same side. I mean, even if we're from the same country, your political views vastly differ. Well, let's see. I'm trying to circle back to we're approaching the top of the hour. Might be a good time to see where we stand on InfoSec talks. Anybody have another talk that they want to do, a topic they want to discuss? Otherwise, we may call it a little early tonight.
Didn't Tinker have one coming up as well?
Tinker did. I've asked Tinker to replay their original Solarpunk presentation, and because I stupidly forgot to press the record button, that would have probably been one of our hotter topics. So, yes, I think we'll be getting a reprisal of Tinker's talk, maybe some new content soon. But we're seeing a little bit of talk burnout with DHA being back online. So those of you that don't know, Dallas Hackers Association did meet in March for the first time since, what was it, December. And we had, I believe, 55 hackers descend upon Family Karaoke, which was a great time. Great talks. Got to see QWE do their presentation. They did earlier on FireTalks at FireTalks Online in person, which was excellent. Script Kitty Riot had a stream of consciousness about one of her girlfriends constantly being compromised over and over again. I thought that was another interesting talk. But I think we've got a lot of people who are saving their content for DHA nowadays.
Well, I'm wondering if it's also just because it's spring break weekend. or
That's
a week.
true too. A lot of our audience is college based and tend to be out for spring break. So we're gonna keep doing this. We'll keep whether it's just me talking or we have more people, but we can't do this without you folks. So Kelta, great presentation tonight. Well done.
I would agree. Thank you. Yeah, and hopefully one day I'll be able to get more into it and provide some presentations. But I did have a question. Do they still do the CTF events at the live event?
So we haven't had one in a while. Mad Hat has taken the banner, the moniker of CTF owner. We are going to have one. It's just not right now. If not, I'll find out for sure when we're getting one. But yes, we will have a CTF again.
Typically, how does it usually work? Is it only on the local LAN, or is it? You bring your machine and I guess the machine itself or virtual is on the local LAN only, or?
It depends on who's doing it. In the past, it was a Commander OPSEC with the local LAN. I once had some CTFs where we did it all virtually and we used cloud infrastructure. It was all like encryption based and code none of it was like actual like required infrastructure. So it just depends on who's the person or who's the team doing the CTF. But most often we've always had just that local LAN. You dial in, bring your hardware, and go to town.
Okay.
Well,
All right.
anybody.
And it doesn't matter on your skill set? Because I'm just starting to get into it. That's why I have an interest.
Oh, it's for all skill sets. So very basic, attacks all the way up to reverse engineering of binaries and more advanced concepts. So it's meant for everyone for sure.
Okay.
All right. Lotus, I thought I interrupted you for a second. Anything else you want to say?
Does it or can anybody for future do the talk about Apple security? Because my 10-year-old, and I still stump how he did it. I have a print, I have a password, and he still spent $40 on his iPad, and I don't know how.
Roblox is a bitch, huh?
So if somebody told me the password, he doesn't, and in the print, it's my print. We don't have same print. So something I'm breaking my head off. So if somebody can just do talk or research how Apple security works, like how. So.
I know I've bypassed the Apple Face ID through just holding up the phone next to my mother-in-law to get into her phone when she was troubleshooting with me. So maybe your child is just happening to be conveniently waving their phone around at you. I don't know.
No, he's sneaky. He usually takes it in another room, say it's a business.
All right, folks. Well, it is 8 p.m. Central Time. We've had a great talk. Kelta, again, I wish that wasn't a hypothetical. I wish this was real, But the tech behind it was, though, which I think was a really cool aspect of this. So we're going to call it for tonight. I got to get these kids ready for bed. It's about time for us to start getting ready for bed over here. But we'll be back again, third Wednesday of the month. We may be pushing the date 1 or 2 days back or forth. Turns out that the DEF CON Denton group, or Pwn School, whatever Philip Wiley's doing, I believe is also on the same date and time, so we don't want to overlap and cannibalize our attendance. So we may be changing the date, but we're still going to have an FTO. So with that said,
It wouldn't hurt to have something that's not on Wednesday, because there are some people that are not available on Wednesdays.
You absolutely are right, Sensei. I remember Nano and some other folks were complaining about having every event on Wednesdays. So I think we may be doing something on a Tuesday or a Thursday or something. So we'll see about that. All right, folks. Well, we're going to call it. Y'all have a great rest of your evening. Those of you on the in the EMEA side, go to sleep. It's past your bedtime, folks. Okay.